Здравейте, приятели! Днес на 23 януари 2024 година. В днешния епизод увертюрата представлявам аз, а не че е чуждо видео, поради простия факт, че след нея следва един относително подробен видеообзор на Давос 2024. В рамките на този обзор аз съм се опитал да представя това, което аз видях, когато наблюдавах тези изключително симпатични, хубави, умни и милеещи за доброто на всички хора. Първоначалната ми идея беше да представя всичко това по един значително по-забавен начин, но всъщност прецених, че да, от гледна точка на забавление, това наистина е един добър вариант, но от гледна точка на информативност, именно това вие зрителите да видите точно какви хора се събират там, точно какви ги говорят, с така минимум намеса от моя страна, като добавени някакви видеоелементи, музика, анимации и така нататък. Това е значително по-добре. Просто да видите какви са нашите така наречени лидери и по какъв начин те възнамеряват да се погрижат за нас. В рамките на видеото, разбира се, на няколко момента съм сложил нещо за поосвежаване на гледката, защото това са едни живи трупове, лично според мен, хора, които почти всички, с много малки изключения, представляват мъртъвци, обитаващи тела, които още не са разбрали, че са мъртви. По отношение на видеото, първата част на видеото представлява перформанса на представителите на давоската тълпа. Втората част представлява една поредица, пак от видеоизпълнения, на хора, които са категорични противници на тази специфична групичка, на този клуб по интереси. В крайна сметка, нека да направим един социален експеримент в резултат на гледането на следващото видео. Моля всички, които знаят за Давос, всички, които знаят за всички аналогични и подобни организации, просто да забравят за своите познания и всички да се опитате да гледате това, което ви представям с, как се казва, бистри очи. Все едно сте табла раза, нали, изтрита дъска. Много ми е интересно до какви изводи ще стигнете относно намеренията на тези хора, които са на висши ръководни позиции, намеренията за нас, простите хорица, обитаващи планетата Земя. Отново с уговорката, че не всичко е толкова, поне според мен, не изглежда толкова зле, съм добавил и втората част с значителната вече и все повече нарастваща съпротива срещу тази избирщина от, за мен, честно казано, абсолютно абсурдни индивиди, които не би трябвало по никакъв начин дори да се докосват до каквато и да било власт. Драги приятели, толкова от мен като въведение. Приятно гледане!
As trustees of the future, we are responsible for advancing a world which is richer in possibilities, more equitable in opportunities, and more secure in its foundations. Moreover, as leaders in government, business, and society, we bear a particular responsibility to rebuild trust in how we assume our own role as trustees.
I must confess, you have an astonishingly good idea there, Doctor.
And this makes the theme of this year's Davos meeting even more relevant: rebuilding trust. I believe it can be done, and I believe that Europe can and must take the lead in shaping that global response. It has never been more important for the public and private sector to create new connective tissue. While governments hold many of the levers to deal with the great challenges of our time, business have the innovation, the technology, the talents to deliver the solutions we need, to fight threats like climate change or industrial-scale disinformation. There will always be attempts to push us off track. for example, with disinformation and misinformation. And nowhere has there been more of that than on the issue of Ukraine. So let me provide you with some real information. Russia is failing on strategic goals. It is first and foremost a military failure. We haven't forgotten that when Russia invaded Ukraine, many feared that Kyiv would fall in just a few days and the rest of the country within weeks. This did not happen.
Let me take you back 2 years ago to this day, when Putin had amassed 180,000 soldiers on Ukraine's border, surrounding the country on 3 sides. He expected a quick victory, that he could send a column of tanks to Kyiv and topple the democratically elected government of Ukraine.
Putin has already failed in what he set out to do. He set out to erase Ukraine from the map, to eliminate its independence, to subsume it into Russia.
Instead, Russia has lost roughly half of its military capabilities.
They've imposed severe costs on the Russian military, destroying major capabilities built up over decades.
Ukraine has driven Russia out of half of the territories it had captured.
Brave Ukrainian soldiers have retaken more than half of the territory that Russia occupied from the start of this conflict.
You've been able to take back 50% of the territory that he occupied.
Over the past year, it took back more than 50% of the territory that had been taken from it in February of 2022.
Ukraine has pushed back Russia's Black Sea fleet and reopened a maritime corridor to deliver the grain to the world.
They've severely degraded Russia's Black Sea fleet, dramatically increasing Ukraine's exports through the Black Sea.
What Ukraine managed to do in the Black Sea, opening it up, pushing the Russian Navy back.
And we can prove that Russia will reconcile with the complete loss of its Black Sea fleet.
And Ukraine has retained its freedom and its independence. Russia's failure is also economic. Sanctions have decoupled its economy from modern technology and innovation. Russia is now dependent on China. And finally, Russia's failure is also diplomatic. Finland has joined NATO. Sweden will follow soon. And Ukraine is closer than ever on its path to the European Union.
2 years later, Putin has not only failed in his imperialist quest to subjugate Ukraine, his invasion has strengthened Ukrainian sovereignty, the very sovereignty he sought to erase, and bolstered the very NATO resolve he sought to weaken. In fact, while he sought to diminish NATO, his action grew our ranks instead.
The NATO alliance is stronger, it's larger, and it will get larger still in the weeks ahead.
And amid all of this, Ukraine has made economic reforms, strengthened its own defense industrial base, and accelerated its integration with the West.
But we must continue to empower their resistance. Ukrainians need predictable financing throughout 2024 and beyond. They need a sustained supply of weapons to defend Ukraine and regain its rightful territory. They need capabilities to deter future attacks by Russia.
But as President Zelensky has discussed with President Biden, and as Secretary Blinken and I discussed with him earlier today, the people of Ukraine are steeled for the struggle ahead, and the United States and our partners will continue to stand with them. We're expanding training for Ukrainian troops. We're working to secure bipartisan support for the necessary resources to supply Ukraine with the weapons it needs. We're ramping up our own defense industrial base while denying Russia access to critical inputs it needs to do the same.
So we kind of offer the best deal on global market of security. Give us the weapons, give us the money, and we will finish the job.
And all of this tells us that Ukraine can prevail in this war.
дуже хочу звернути увагу на те, що відбувається в нашій бригаді, 110-й бригаді, 3-й БАТ, 9-та рота. Наші командири забороняють виносити тіла з цих позицій для того, щоб вони числилися так безвісті пропавшими. Це правда, так.
А навіщо це робиться?
Ви в мене питаєте?
Ну от, ваші догадки.
Справа в тім, що дивіться, зарплати і оці премії, вони йдуть не напряму з Міністерства фінансів чи з Міністерства оборони, а вони йдуть якимось таким потоком, що потім перерозподіляються через нашого комбата. Ну і це як мертві душі, да, воля Миколи Васильовича. Тобто вони деякий час, цих 3 місяці, вважаються, що вони безвісті пропавші, на них йде фінансування там, зарплати і премії, а потім наступає час, і оцей термін зменшується, вони потім начисляють на інших людей.
So we kind of offer the best deal on global market of security. Give us the weapons, give us the money, and we will finish the job.
What are we able to keep on the positive side from the old order to bring into a new world order, and how can we avoid that new world order becomes like a jungle growing back, and we rather have an order based on international law and the principles that have brought us prosperity and freedom for decades.
At the heart of it will be many of the core principles and core institutions of the existing order.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, please join me in welcoming Volodymyr Zelensky, the President of Ukraine.
Cocaine is a hell of a drug. Thank you so much. One man has stolen at least 13 years of peace, replacing them with pain, and crises that impact the entire world. In fact, Putin embodies war. He will not change. He enjoys conflicts that cause suffering to others. If anyone thinks this is only about us, this is only about Ukraine, they are fundamentally mistaken. And if one must fight against Putin together in the years ahead, isn't it better to put an end to him and his war strategy now? Putin is the only terrorist in the world who took a nuclear power plant hostage. Putin must regret. We need him to lose. Putin is a predator who is not satisfied with the frozen products. It must be a strong decision this year when frozen Russian assets, soaring and oligarchic, will be directed towards defense against the Russian war and for reconstruction of Ukraine. And we need you in Ukraine to build, to reconstruct, to restore our lives.
Show me the money.
I think we all know when we are witnessing history, and with President Zelensky, he's one of the historical figures of our time.
Your question is quite interesting.
Let's see if everyone gets on.
Yeah, please.
And here you have some water.
Try. No, I have water.
Okay.
I will wait. I have enough time till morning. No, I have not. Sorry.
No. To rest in this world or in the other world, neither he nor his children or grandchildren will not have safe rest.
А что касается вот этого переговорного процесса, попытка побудить нас отказаться от тех завоеваний, которые мы реализовали за последние 1,5 года. Но это невозможно. Все понимают, что это невозможно. И они, правящие круги на Украине, понимают. И западные элиты понимают. Все понимают. Просто вот эти так называемые формулы мира, о которых говорят на Западе и на Украине, это продолжение реализации декрета президента Украины о запрете вести переговоры с Россией. Вот что это такое. Это запретительные требования для переговорного процесса. Но не хотят, не надо. Просто если дальше будет продолжаться то, что сейчас продолжаете. То, что сейчас имеет место быть, а сейчас это совершенно очевидно, не только провалилось их контрнаступление, но инициатива полностью находится в руках российских вооруженных сил. Если так будет дальше продолжаться, украинской государственности может быть нанесен невосполнимый, очень серьезный удар. Но это их зона ответственности.
And it was our progress toward that goal that Hamas sought to destroy on October 7th, when they came across the border into Israel, viciously massacred 1,200 people, took more than 200 hostages, and then turned and fled, hiding behind an innocent civilian population and vowing to commit October 7th again and again. That is the reality Israel is contending with, a determined terrorist threat that chose as its battlefield the communities of innocent civilians, and still to this day holds more than 100 hostages in circumstances that are dire and deteriorating. Now, this does not lessen at all Israel's responsibility to conduct its campaign in a way that upholds international humanitarian law and abides by the moral and strategic necessity to distinguish between terrorists and innocent civilians.
For me, I think for so many of us, what we're seeing every single day in Gaza is gut-wrenching. And the suffering we're seeing among innocent men, women, and children breaks my heart. The question is, what is to be done? It's why we're at it relentlessly every single day. And all I can tell you, Tom, is just on a purely human level, it's devastating, but it reinforces the conviction and the commitment to do two things. To do everything we can in this moment, using our best judgment. And of course, we could be wrong about the judgments we're making, but to try to make a difference in the day in, day out. But it also reinforces my conviction that there has to be, and there is, another way that answers Israel's most profound concerns and questions. Israelis have to live with security. They can't have a repeat of October 7th. No country would accept a repeat of October 7th. And I think, not by way of justification, but just by way of explanation, it's hard to overstate the psychological impact on the country as a whole of what happened on that day. And there are large swaths of the world, going back to one of the first things you said, where information technology, information environments have been used and abused in such a way that large numbers of people don't believe October 7th actually happened. They don't believe that Hamas slaughtered men, women, and children, that it executed parents in front of their kids, that it executed kids in front of their parents, that it burned families alive. They don't believe it. And so, of course, especially with that, everything that followed is even worse. Here's what it comes down to, in my judgment. I think the biggest poison that we face around the world, internally in our societies and externally in our relations with others, is dehumanization. The inability to see the humanity in the other. And that applies in every direction. And when that happens, you get so hardened that you're willing to do and accept things that you wouldn't if the humanity of the other was front and center in your conscience.
For 30 years, I am very consistent, and I'm saying something very simple. This conflict is not on the lack of a state of Palestinian, but the existence of a state, the Jewish state. And therefore, I clarify that in other arrangement, any other arrangement, in the future, the state of Israel have to control on the entire area from the river to the sea.
Did the president address Netanyahu's use of the phrase "from the river to the sea" in their conversation today? I know the White House has previously said that phrase is divisive. So
I'm not aware that that specific phrase was discussed.
Do you condemn him using that phrase?
Look, there's a connotation with that phrase. We've talked about this before, but when you use the phrase "river to the sea," it speaks basically to the mantra of Hamas and in their manifesto, where they basically describe the geographic bounds of what they believe to be Palestine. And if you look at it on the map, if you go look at the four corners that they describe it, it's basically the state of Israel. They just don't believe it should exist. So again, it's not a phrase that that we recommend using, given because of that context.
But this wasn't Hamas. This was Netanyahu.
I understand. I don't have anything more on that, and I certainly don't have anything more on the conversation to read out with respect to that.
In the Red Sea, reckless attacks by the Iranian-backed Houthi rebels, including the use of anti-ship ballistic missiles, have threatened freedom of navigation in one of the world's most vital waterways. We are not looking for regional conflict. Far from it. Through a combination of steady deterrence and steadfast diplomacy, we seek to stop the spread of conflict and to create the conditions for de-escalation.
Are the airstrikes in Yemen working?
Well, when you say working, are they stopping the Houthis? No. Are they going to continue? Yes.
Here's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing from virtually every country. They want the United States. They want us present. They want us at the table. They want us leading.
I agree with you that in the west of Asia, right now, we are witnessing the enlargement of the crisis and the tensions. But these tensions are not rooted on what happened on 7th of October. Hamas is a Palestinian liberation group that has been fighting against occupation to liberate the occupied territories of Palestine. They carried out an operation. Tell you that it is not rooted on what happened on 7th of October. It is rooted in 75 years ago when Palestine was occupied by the Israeli regime. The security in the Red Sea is now very much tied to the developments in Gaza. We will all be at loss if it will be to our detriment if the killings and the attacks and genocide in Gaza do not stop. If the genocide in Gaza stops, then it will lead to the end of other crises and attacks in the region.
The United States is competing with China across multiple dimensions, and we make no bones about that. But we are not looking for confrontation or conflict, and we are seeking to manage that competition responsibly, intensifying diplomacy to reduce the risk of miscalculation. To deal with this, we've taken steps to regulate specific outbound investments of concern in technology, and we've implemented carefully tailored restrictions on exports, focused on advanced semiconductor manufacturing tools, supercomputing capabilities, and the most advanced chips. Now, I want to be clear. These tailored measures are not a technology blockade. Our goal is to ensure that the next generation of technologies works for, not against, our security and our democracy. Today, the United States has the strongest recovery and lowest inflation of any leading economy. We've created nearly 14 million jobs, including 750,000 manufacturing jobs across all 50 states. Real wages are rising. We've had 23 straight months of unemployment under 4% for the first time in half a century. And what's even more compelling in a forum like this, our partners have joined us in this journey. This time last year, there were murmurs that the United States' historic domestic investments would fracture the global economic order and weaken our alliances. The reality is that countries around the world want to follow the formula that we've developed, and we want to help them do that. making bold investments, building high-quality infrastructure, empowering workers, tackling climate change. And we've also been focused on ensuring our approach works for everyone, including emerging market and developing countries.
When did the word expert become almost an insult in some circles, or that some circles started to mistrust the word expert itself?
If you go back really not that long ago, as I say, we owned the news. We were the gatekeepers, and we very much owned the facts as well. If it said it in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, then that was a fact. Nowadays, people can go to all sorts of different sources for the news, and they're much more questioning about what we're saying.
The bottom line of this dossier, the bottom line allegation, the point of it, is that the Trump campaign didn't just benefit from Russia interfering in our presidential campaign. The point of this is they colluded, they helped, they were in on it. This is kind of a real story. The connections between the Trump servers and the Alpha Bank servers were real. Now we know that the vaccines work well enough that the virus stops with every vaccinated person. We and other news organizations have generally stopped giving an unfiltered live platform to remarks by former President Trump. It is not out of spite. It is not a decision that we relish. It is a decision that we regularly revisit. And honestly, earnestly, it is not an easy decision, but there is a cost to us as a news organization of knowingly broadcasting untrue things. Let me just interject. Sorry. I'm sorry, I just have to do a little bit of business just for a second. At this point in the evening, the projected winner of the Iowa caucuses has just started giving his victory speech. We will keep an eye on that as it happens. We will let you know if there's any news made in that speech, if there's anything noteworthy, something substantive and important.
Agriculture contributes about 33% of all the emissions of the world. And we can't get to net zero unless agriculture is front and center as part of the solution. But with a growing population on the planet, we just crossed the threshold of 8 billion fellow citizens around the world. Emissions from the food system alone are projected to cause another 0.5 degree of warming by mid-century on the current course that we are today. And you just can't continue to both warm the planet while also expecting to feed it. So we have to reduce emissions from the food system to keep the 1.5 degrees alive.
I cannot think of a topic more urgent, actually, than the intersection of climate change and health. And I apologize that my back is to some folks. The climate crisis is a health crisis, fundamentally. And that actually means it is a crisis, therefore, also of our stability, our security, our economic growth, and our fundamental future as a globe. When we think about it, health is fundamental to everything that we are trying to do.
Basically, the coffee that we all drink emits between 15 and 20 tons of CO2 per ton of coffee. So we should all know that this is, every time we drink coffee, we are basically putting CO2 into the atmosphere.
Are you the right messenger on this? Because you fly private planes a lot and you're creating a lot of greenhouse gases yourself.
Yeah, I'd probably have one of the highest greenhouse gas footprints of anyone on the planet. You know, my
kind of
personal flying alone is gigantic.
I mean, ecocide as a word is becoming better known around the world, and the concept is generally mass damage and destruction of nature. But legally speaking, what our organisation and other collaborators aim to do is to have this recognised legally as a serious crime, as seriously as we take damage to people and property. And that, I mean, you know, if you're campaigning for human rights, at least you know mass murder, torture, all of these things are serious crimes. But there's no equivalent in the environmental space. And so, you know, unlike an international crime like genocide that involves a specific intent, with ecocide, what we see is actually what people are trying to do, what businesses are trying to do, is make money, is farm, is fish, is do all of these things that are producing energy and so on. But legally speaking, what our organisation and other collaborators aim to do is to have this recognised legally as a serious crime.
Fucking cunts. They're the people that grow your food, goddammit. Wake up.
wake up to why anybody would do that. What fucking government would fuck with the farmers? What government would make it harder on the farmers? You're telling me that that's your number one problem is the farmers? How much crime do you have? How many murders? How many thieves? How many rapists? How many child molesters? How many swindlers? How many people that are ripping people off? How many credit card fraudsters do you have out there? And you're going after farmers?
There is clearly an aspiration, a desire for digital payments, much more so than it was in the past, and this is growing. We are now, in the surveys that we've conducted across the 19 members of the euro area, we have more than 50% of the respondents who say, we want digital payments. Well, less use of cash, demand for secure and riskless payments. Where do we stand? We central bankers, we have been operating as a monetary anchor in relation to the commercial banks and the private money. If we are not in that game, if we are not involved in experimenting, in innovating in terms of digital central bank money, we risk losing the role of anchor that we have played for many, many decades.
When I started this job, there were actually very little countries in Africa or Latin America that had one ubiquitous type of ID, and certainly that it was digital, and certainly that it was biometric. And now we've really worked with all our partners to actually help that being, to grow this. And the interesting part of it is that, yes, it is very necessary for financial services, but not only. Sure. It's also good for school enrollment. It's also good for health, who actually got a vaccination or not. It's very good to get your subsidies, from the government.
As a politician, I look at the big problems that we face. For example, when we have the next pandemic, we don't want to have to wait a year before we get the vaccine. And if AI can shrink the time it takes to get that vaccine to a month, then that is a massive step forward for humanity.
We will have new vaccines. We'll have a TB vaccine, malaria vaccine, HIV vaccine, and even the things like COVID vaccines. We need to make them have longer duration, more coverage, and we're going to change, instead of using a needle, to use a little patch. So the pandemic really highlighted that we've been underinvested in those innovations.
You need to know who's been vaccinated and who hasn't been. Some of the vaccines that will come on down the line will be multiple. There'll be multiple shots. So you've got to have, for reasons to do with the healthcare more generally, but certainly for a pandemic or for vaccines, you've got to have a proper digital infrastructure.
What's wrong with you? What's wrong with y'all? You niggas are crazy!
But I would like to start with especially the disease X. It's attracting a lot of attention, and I hope you have seen in the social media. But it's not a new idea. The discussions were in 2017. I was just new Director General. There are things that are unknown that may happen, and anything happening is a matter of when, not if. So we need to have a placeholder for that, for the disease we don't know that may come. And that was when we gave the name Disease X. Although COVID came immediately, we were preparing for COVID-like disease. You may even call COVID as the first Disease X. And it may happen again.
This portion of CBS This Morning sponsored by Pfizer.
Good Morning America is brought to you by Pfizer.
CBS Health Watch sponsored by Pfizer.
Anderson Cooper 360. Brought to you by Pfizer.
ABC News Nightline. Brought to you by Pfizer.
Making a difference. Brought to you by Pfizer.
CNN Tonight. Brought to you by Pfizer. Early Start. Brought to you by Pfizer. Friday night on Aaron Burnett Out Front. Brought to you by Pfizer.
This Week with George Stephanopoulos is brought to you by Pfizer.
Today's countdown to the royal wedding is brought to you by Pfizer.
And now a CBS Sports Update brought to you by Pfizer.
Meet the Press Data Download brought to you by
Pfizer.
This portion of CBS This Morning sponsored by Pfizer.
On how to find the hidden sugars in the American family diet, sponsored by Pfizer.
A safe and effective vaccine is our best chance to beat coronavirus and return to our normal lives. In the past month, the European Commission has been working tirelessly to secure doses of potential vaccines. And tomorrow, we authorize a contract for up to 300 million doses of the vaccine developed by BioNTech and Pfizer. This is the most promising vaccine so far. And once this vaccine becomes available, our plan is to deploy it quickly everywhere in Europe.
Pendant que Mme von der Leyen déclarait il y a encore quelques jours qu'elle souhaitait que les États membres réfléchissent à une obligation vaccinale pour tout le monde, la Commission continuait de cacher les SMS échangés entre elle et le PDG de Pfizer lors de la négociation du fameux contrat d'achat du vaccin à 90% caviardé. En même temps, Pfizer prévoit en 2022 de vendre 54 milliards de dollars de vaccins et de pilules anti-Covid.
I believe it can be done.
Company purchasing cancer drug maker Seagen for, get this, $43 billion.
$43 billion is a big acquisition. And I looked into this quite in depth. So, this company has a few cancer treatments on the market right now. And in total, those cancer treatments are bringing in about $2 billion in revenue a year. So Pfizer's spending $43 billion to acquire a company that's making revenue of about $2 billion a year. I would urge people to look at the interviews that the Pfizer CEO, Albert Bourla, has done about this acquisition and the way he's talking about recently about cancer in general.
It's giving us the ability to repeat once more what we did with BioNTech and the technology of mRNA against vaccines. With vaccines, now we can do it against cancer. Cancer, as you know, it is one of the biggest concerns of humanity. 1 in 3 people are getting cancer or will get cancer in their lifetime, unfortunately. And many more will be affected, by the way.
They're actually chilling interviews. It almost makes your skin crawl because he's telling us things that on the surface don't make any sense. And so he's saying something like, well, 1 in 3 people are going to get cancer. And he's like, that's a fact, right? 1 in 3 people are going to get cancer. Cancer is our next big thing, even though, they've had a massive success with the COVID-19 vaccines. And of course, we know that they have, probably over 100 mRNA vaccines in the pipeline, things that they want to bring out in terms of the influenza mRNA vaccines, RSV mRNA vaccines, CMV, obviously the cancer vaccines as well. And yet, he's not talking about that. He is talking about our next big thing is cancer. And everyone's, 1/3 of people are going to get cancer. It's going to affect everybody. And he says, we're going to take this company and their cancer treatment technologies, and we're going to scale up the production to levels the world has never seen before. I'm thinking, what are you talking about? So he's talking about scaling up production in the way that the mRNA production was scaled up to treat billions of people, right? Or to, put out billions of mRNA vaccines, while he's going to now use the same principle to scale up production of cancer treatments. Well, why would you need to do that? Cancer is a very steady phenomenon. You don't see huge spikes in cancer over time. You see very slow trends, maybe increasing over time, but it's very, very stable. And why would you suddenly need to scale up production of various cancer treatments like breast cancers or colon cancers or lymphomas? That's supposed to be steady over time. And he's talking about like he's expecting some like World War III, some nuclear fallout where everyone's going to get cancer, and then he's going to be, there to profit off it. But that's exactly how he's talking about it. So it's fascinating to watch his interviews. And what does he know that the rest of us don't know? And he talks about this is going to fill our portfolio or our revenue stream from 2025 to 2030. He even gives us the time period where he expects this to be the huge moneymaker that it's not right now. So it's a fascinating interview. He's expecting an absolute tsunami of cancers from 2025 to 2030.
They like being around other sociopaths. They like being around other people that are taking over businesses, hostile takeovers. They like to be around the guys who influence foreign governments, the guys who fly over in private jets and sit with their legs crossed with Italian shoes on. You know, and they have conversations about clean energy, and you know what they really want to do is control all the fucking food, control the farmlands. You know, we have to reduce the methane from these cows, and the best way to do it is just take the cows away from the farmers. If we just control the cows, if we have a climate change mandate and we control the farms, I mean, it's basically game over. They're literally doing that.
All bad guys have a British accent.
There's no reason why you would say we shouldn't have cows.
What a brilliant idea. What do you mean just stop oil? All your stuff is made out of oil, you idiots. Your clothes, these jackets, they're all made out of oil. What the hell are you doing here, making a nuisance of yourselves? It's a joke. What a joke. What are you doing here? Get out the road. You're wasting everybody's time and petrol. All these guys, their engines are running all the time, wasting more bloody oil, you nutters. What is this made out of? What are your clothes made out of? How did your clothes get here? They got here by oil. What are you doing? This makes no sense at all. Just stop oil. You haven't thought about this. If you want to stop oil, you need to stay at home and go and live in the forest.
One of the primary sad things that they refuse to recognize, that I know you know that in even grade school sciences, CO2 is a gas of life. When you have more CO2, the plant kingdom, the whole ecology, even the oceans, gonna have more, basically, ability, more fishes, more everything.
More life.
More life, essentially. That's why it's called gas of life. And these people want to demonize it as some gas that can cause global warming, can cause hurricane to run faster or weaker. I don't know what they want. To have more rain, more droughts, and all this other nonsense that they claim. All of that, it just ain't so. That's the problem. By the way, this is how serious I am. I check everything they say. I check. As a scientist, you cannot just dismiss them. You cannot laugh at them. You cannot, chide them. You cannot just make joke of them. You check everything. So as a very serious scientist, and I publish scientific paper refuting all of these arguments. Scientific papers maybe mean nothing to the average people, but it's really important. It's like a document that you have to document and then put out the proper scientific arguments about what is right, what is wrong.
And they're getting away with doing something now. They're going into agriculture and threatening to cut off the supply of food because food is causing global warming. And, oh, isn't that nice? Only the billionaires will be able to afford to buy food, and all the other people will die, and because there's not enough food. That's what we're heading for if we continue to listen to these people. And they are about to perpetrate one of the most evil acts in the history of human civilization, which is to cause poverty and starvation to hundreds of people if they go with this net zero. In order to get net zero, first off, we'd have to kill all the animals, including ourselves, because we are an emission of CO2. We are talking about the most important things for the survival of ourselves every day: food and energy. Nothing else is as important as those two things. Water, right? It's part of food. They haven't decided to cut the water off just yet. But if they go ahead with what they are thinking and planning, they will cause a ruination the likes of which the earth has never seen. Because there are over 8 billion of us, and 4 billion of us depend on nitrogen fertilizer, which they now say is bad because it's a greenhouse gas or whatever. It isn't actually a greenhouse gas, but they've got some story about how nitrogen, in the form of nitrous oxide, is going to cause the earth to warm up to unacceptable degrees. It's all completely phony. And so is the campaign against CO2, completely phony. There's nothing to it. It's not a real thing. And yet they have made it into a real thing in the West in particular. Russia, India, and China are busy building coal plants and nuclear plants
Would you speak to the people who believe it is a worthwhile vaccine and it is saving lives? Are they just dead wrong? Are they been fed a line from the federal government?
Tim, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the people that went ahead and got the jab. I speak their language. I would speak to them thusly. Bah, 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 bah. They understand that.
Well, so all these millions of people that got the shots, they're just stupid?
Yep.
This whole COVID madness, this so-called pandemic, it was just a test balloon, a gigantic test balloon. Well, for what, you ask? Well, to see how far they could go, to see what exactly they would have to do to get free individuals in a free and democratic society to consent to being forced into compliance.
There is a burning question, Sir Gary, at the heart of this debate. This is, after excess deaths, there should be a deficit. Where is that expected deficit? When will we have it? And worse, why is the deficit not being filled but significantly exceeded? And why are the institutions whose job it is to notice these matters, to record these matters, to publicise and call attention to these matters, why are they all apparently asleep at the wheel? And the second burning question, which I'll come to first, is why is no one listening to those raising the alarm? The research and analysis of two of Britain's most trusted doctors provides us with alarming clarity. Only this week, Sir Gary, the director of the Centre of Evidence-Based Medicine at the University of Oxford, Professor Carl Hennigan, reviewed the causes of excess deaths and concludes that they are predominantly related to cardiovascular disease. He told the Sunday Express newspaper this cannot be explained by COVID, population growth, or an ageing population. Consultant cardiologist Dr. Asim Malhotra, who is a world-leading expert in the causes of heart disease, also told TNT Radio yesterday that even though cardiovascular disease is multifactorial, the top of the list in the hierarchy of causes behind excess cardiac-related deaths has to be the experimental COVID mRNA vaccine until proven otherwise. And this is not speculative. No, I won't give way at this, but let me just finish this trial and I'll give way to the honourable gentleman. This is not speculative, but based on the highest level of data, which combines plausible biological mechanism, randomised controlled trials, high-quality observational data, pharmacovigilance data, autopsy data, and clinical data. And those who choose not to acknowledge these cold, hard facts, Mr. Gary, are either unaware of the evidence, willfully blind, or lack a conscience.
Every day now the mask falls further. On the very same day that the West's pet bulldog Israel was hauled into The Hague to face the charge of genocide in which EU countries are complicit, our so-called like-minded partners, the US and Britain, flout the UN Charter to commit their latest crime of aggression: illegal, unprovoked, unjustified airstrikes on Yemen. Lawless, barbarous acts to inflame the region and to make worse the catastrophic cost of living crisis being experienced by millions of Europeans. And now some of ye actually want to join them. Seriously, with a straight face, people have come in here and said they want to do that in order to uphold international law. The very same international law that a horrified world has watched being trampled into the ruins of Gaza while the EU hands Israel more weapons and cheers on the genocide. The Yemenis have killed no one. 25,000 Palestinians are dead, and all you're enraged about is international shipping. It's over. The EU has no moral authority. If you want to sort the situation out, end the genocide.
It's laughable that you would, or anyone would, describe Davos as protecting liberal democracy. It's equally,
standing up for it.
It's equally laughable to use the word dictatorship at Davos and aim that at President Trump. In fact, I think that's absurd. But I'm going to step aside from that constructive criticism and instead answer your question.
Yep.
And I'm going to be substantive here. President Trump, if he's the next president, for that matter, I think whoever the next conservative president, is going to take on the power of the elites, which I've mentioned earlier. But the thing that I want to drive home here, the very reason that I'm here at Davos, is to explain to many people in this room and who are watching, with all due respect, nothing personal, but that you're part of the problem. Political elites tell the average people on 3 or 4 or 5 issues that the reality is X, when in fact reality is Y. Take immigration. Elites tell us that open borders and even illegal immigration are okay. The average person tells us in the United States that both rob them of the American way of life. They're right.
I think it's a mistake to assume that everything's hunky-dory. And, you know, and when stock markets are up, it's kind of like this little drug we all feel. Like, it's just great, you know. But remember, we've had so much fiscal and monetary stimulation, so I'm a little more on the cautious side, that we are facing a lot of things in 24 or 25. And we mentioned Ukraine, the terrorist activity in Israel, the Red Sea, quantitative tightening, which I still question if we understand exactly how that works. I don't think we do. How QE actually worked, what the effect of negative, zero rates was for all this time, and obviously the politics, and and then the Ukrainian war is affecting oil, gas, food, migration. So you have all these very powerful forces that are going to be affecting us in 24 and 25. So if I was the government, I would be preparing for what I'm going to do about that, assuming things aren't good. And I just also want to point out, I wish the Democrats would think a little more carefully when they talk about MAGA. And if you travel this country, and the country's unbelievable. We took our bus trip this year, and Leslie Picker was on Spokane and Boise and Bozeman. People are growing. They're hungry to grow. They're innovating. It's everywhere. It's not just Silicon Valley. So we've got this great hand. But when people say MAGA, they're actually looking at people voting for Trump, and they think they're voting, and they're basically scapegoating them, that you are like him. But I don't think they're voting for Trump because of his family values. Now, if you look, just take a step back, be honest. He was kind of right about NATO, kind of right about immigration. Mm-hmm. He grew the economy quite well.
China virus.
Tax reform worked. Mm-hmm. He was right about some of China. I don't like what he did.
No, I said China virus.
Yeah, I understand. He may have been right. And I don't like how he said things about Mexico. I don't like, but he wasn't wrong about some of these critical issues. And that's why they're voting for him. And I think people should be a little more respectful of our fellow citizens. And when you guys have people up here, you should always ask the why. Not like it's a binary thing. You're supporting Trump, you're not supporting Trump. Why are you supporting Trump?
It's hard to hate 75 million of your fellow Americans. And
I agree.
It's done
and, the Democrats have done a pretty good job with the deplorables, hugging onto their Bibles and their beer and their guns. I mean, really, can we just stop that stuff and actually grow up and treat other people with respect and listen to them a little bit? And I do think the economy will affect. And I think this negative talk about MAGA is going to hurt Biden's election campaign.
And tonight I'm also making another promise to protect Americans from government tyranny. As your president, I will never allow the creation of a central bank digital currency. Do you know about that?
As black people, we with Trump.
Yeah, I'm with Trump. I don't know what everybody got against him.
Yo, he was making the breadwinners, you heard?
I'm a Democrat too, but we Trump. We need Trump back in office right now.
I'm gonna be honest with you. I with Trump, to be honest with you, bro, for real, Trump really did this shit. And I like him because he's about money. It wasn't about no politics. He wanted to make America great again. Through Trump.
That boy Trump be making sure to get their bread. I ain't gonna lie. I'm thinking Trump for life. Trump for life.
Well, I say these words with no disrespect. Canada, and I'm an investor, I look at it from that perspective. I'm a Canadian citizen, I'm an Irish citizen, I'm an Emirati citizen. Canada has one of the best natural resource bases on Earth. It's one of the richest countries on Earth from a natural resource basis. It's managed by idiots. Trudeau is the worst prime minister ever put in power. Very successful politician, no executional skills. Hopefully, we will thank him for his service within the next 18 months. It's so important to Canada that he move on. And I mean no disrespect, but full disrespect. Very successful politician, incredibly weak manager.
So you argue he has not taken advantage of those resources. That's what that comes down to, right?
Oh, it's much worse than that. I wouldn't let him manage a candy store.
We've got a pretty supportive gay and lesbian community in this city. I did want to ask you about something you wrote a couple of years ago. You said, if I had a gay son, I would think I'd...
Oh, look, another. I'm saying to you, the swamp, you guys, the swamp.
You become a champion, you become a star, and someone says...
Let me ask you something. Are you gay?
Have you had the chance to interact with a more diverse...
Let me know, are you gay?
Can I get an answer?
Well, no, I'm asking, this is the part of, are you a gay man?
I'm an ally of the community.
Okay. If you had a son and he was like, you had a son, he was gay, you'd be like, oh man, you don't want a grandkid?
No problem with it.
Oh, man. Well, dude, you're a weak fucking man, dude. You're part of the fucking problem. You elected Justin Trudeau. Like, when he sees the bank accounts, like, you're just fucking pathetic. And the fact that you have no fucking backbone and has he shut down your fucking country and seized bank accounts? You ask me some stupid shit like that, go fuck yourself. Move the fuck on, man.
That doesn't really answer the question, but I did want to ask also things you said about the trans community. You said this past October when they announced the Bud Light sponsorship that you'd go so hard on Bud Light in your next flight, they'll have to accept me or denounce me when they know what, and will know what they stand for.
This guy's like, nah, this Canadian's not that Canadian.
Are you still going to use your flight time to kind of speak on that?
Here's the thing about Bud Light. 10 years ago, to be trans was a mental fucking illness. And now all of a sudden, people like you have fucking weaseled your way into the world. You are an infection. You are the definition of weakness. Everything that is wrong with the world is because of fucking you. And the best thing is the world's not buying it. The world's not buying your fucking bullshit you're fucking peddling. The world is not saying, you know what? You're right. Fucking chicks have dicks. The world's not saying that. The world's saying, no, there are two genders. I don't want my kids being taught about, who they could fuck in school. I don't want my kids being taught about, their sexual preference. Like, dude, this guy is the fucking enemy. You want to look at the fucking enemy to our world? It's that motherfucker right there asking these stupid fucking questions.
It's okay standing at microphones like this and meetings like this and saying it's them, it's them, it's them. No! It's only possible, this manipulation, because human race of the world, it is us that allow it to happen.